When you first meet a man with an avoidant attachment style, what often draws you in is the aura of self-sufficiency he carries. He appears composed, grounded, and completely comfortable standing on his own 2 feet. There's an undeniable magnetism in that. It can feel refreshing in a world where so many people seem to cling or rush toward connection without discernment. But here's where the illusion begins to fracture. What he presents as independence is often not true autonomy at all. It's emotional withholding in disguise. It's not that he's genuinely content and whole on his own. It's that he's learned to protect himself by keeping others at arm's length. And when you step close, you start to feel the invisible walls he's built to keep his heart from being touched. The tricky part is that this behavior doesn't show up as coldness right away. In the beginning, he can seem warm, attentive, and even open, but only within very controlled limits. He gives just enough to keep you invested, yet not enough to make himself vulnerable. He might share surface-level stories or intellectual observations about life, but when the conversation drifts toward deeper emotions, his fears, his childhood wounds, his longing for closeness, he subtly shuts down. Maybe he changes the subject, makes a joke, or suddenly gets busy. And you're left wondering why something so seemingly solid starts to feel hollow the moment you try to connect on a soul, deep level. It's not your imagination. It's the hallmark of emotional distance masked as independence. What makes this so confusing is that our culture often celebrates independence as a virtue. And it is, when it comes from a place of wholeness. But what an avoidant man calls independence is rarely wholeness. It's armor. It's a protective mechanism forged from early emotional injuries, from experiences where closeness felt unsafe, suffocating, or unreliable. He learned to survive by becoming emotionally self-contained, not needing anyone, not depending on anyone, not letting anyone all the way in. And while that strategy might have kept him safe in the past, it will starve intimacy in the present. Because love cannot grow where vulnerability is forbidden, you cannot build a deep emotional bond with someone who has vowed, consciously or unconsciously, to never need you. Over time, this dynamic chips away at your emotional well-being. You start doubting your own needs. You wonder if you're asking for too much just by wanting emotional warmth, consistency, and openness. And that's the danger. You begin to shrink yourself to fit the limits of what he's willing to give. You lower the bar, telling yourself that this cool detachment is just his personality, that he's simply not very emotional. But if you look deeper, you'll notice the pattern. He's not emotionally unavailable to everyone except you. He's emotionally unavailable, period. And no amount of patience, love, or proving your worth will break through walls that only he can decide to dismantle. Here's the truth. Independence is only real when it includes the capacity to be emotionally present. When a man is truly whole, he can stand on his own without fearing closeness. He can open his heart without feeling like he's losing himself. If what you're experiencing is someone who consistently withholds emotional connection under the banner of being independent, recognize it for what it is, a red flag, not a strength. Because love doesn't thrive in distance, it thrives in openness, and you deserve someone who isn't just standing alone proudly, but is willing to stand with you fully. One of the most disorienting patterns you'll encounter when dating an avoidant man is the emotional whiplash he creates. The way he can be intensely warm one moment and then suddenly retreat into cold detachment the next. It's like standing in the sun, soaking up its heat, only to have it vanish behind a storm cloud without warning. This hot and cold behavior is not random, even if it feels that way. It's part of the unconscious dance avoidant individuals perform to manage their fear of closeness while still craving connection. And if you're not aware of what's happening, it can pull you into an emotional roller coaster that leaves you confused, anxious, and questioning your worth. In the early stages, this push and pull can be intoxicating. The highs are thrilling. He might shower you with attention, make you feel special, talk about how deeply he feels a connection with you. And then, just when you start to relax into that closeness, he withdraws. Calls go unanswered, texts slow down. His energy turns cool and distant. He might say he's busy, overwhelmed, or just needs space. And on the surface, it sounds reasonable. But the emotional contrast is so sharp that it destabilizes you. You start scanning every interaction for signs of what went wrong. Did you say something? Did you move too fast? Was it something you did or didn't do? This is how the cycle hooks you. You start trying to solve the mystery of his withdrawal, believing that if you can just be the right version of yourself, he'll stay in that warm, affectionate mode. What's really happening, though, is that your closeness triggered his fear of engulfment, the deep-seated fear that intimacy will erase his autonomy or expose him to rejection. So he retreats, not because you did anything wrong, but because the vulnerability he began to feel was too threatening to his nervous system. And when his anxiety subsides, he comes back around, acting as if nothing happened. That return floods you with relief, and the emotional high of his reconnection erases the memory of the cold spell. The brain actually reinforces this pattern through a psychological principle called intermittent reinforcement. It's the same dynamic that makes gambling addictive. The unpredictable reward creates a powerful craving for the next hit of affection. Over time, you stop focusing on how inconsistent he is and start focusing on how to win back his warmth, which is exactly how emotional dependency begins to form. The danger here isn't just heartbreak, it's self-abandonment. You begin to regulate your emotions around his mood swings, waiting for him to come close again so you can feel okay. And each time you do, you teach yourself, at a subconscious level, that your sense of worth depends on his approval. This is how the cycle quietly erodes your self-esteem. You stop trusting your intuition, you stop voicing your needs, and you start walking on eggshells to avoid triggering another withdrawal. You become more focused on not losing him than on asking if this relationship is truly nourishing you. And here's the hard truth: love should not feel like chasing the weather. Real connection doesn't require you to guess which version of someone will show up today. It doesn't keep you in a state of emotional suspense. It grounds you. It steadies you. When someone loves you from a secure place, their warmth isn't a temporary flare. It's a consistent glow. So if you find yourself trapped in a loop of highs and lows with an avoidant man, stop asking how to win the highs back and start asking why you're tolerating the lows. Because love isn't supposed to be a guessing game. It's supposed to be a safe place to land. One of the more subtle but deeply damaging red flags you'll notice when dating an avoidant man is his resistance to commitment, which he often cloaks behind the appearance of having high standards. On the surface, this can seem admirable. He'll talk about wanting something real, something profound, something worth waiting for. He may emphasize how he's not like other people who rush into relationships, that he's being discerning because he takes love seriously. And that sounds mature, even noble. But if you look closer, you'll see that what he calls discernment is often just fear of vulnerability, fear of entanglement, fear of being truly seen. It's not that he's holding out for the right person. It's that he's afraid of letting anyone close enough to matter. This fear doesn't come out as obvious panic. It shows up in subtler, more sophisticated ways. He might avoid labeling the relationship, saying he just wants to go with the flow, or see where things go, even after months of emotional investment from your side. He may keep future plans vague, sidestepping conversations about what you're building together. When intimacy starts to deepen, he finds ways to pump the brakes, suddenly becoming too busy, too stressed, or too unsure to move forward. And because he's likely intelligent and articulate, he can make all of this sound reasonable, even principled. You might find yourself admiring his commitment to not settling, without realizing that what he's actually doing is avoiding risk. The risk of closeness, the risk of needing someone, the risk of having his heart break open. What makes this so emotionally exhausting is that it keeps you suspended in a kind of limbo. You feel the connection. You sense the potential, but he won't anchor it. He keeps one foot in and one foot out, and over time, that instability becomes the emotional climate of the relationship. You're constantly trying to prove you're safe enough, good enough, extraordinary enough to make him commit. And in doing so, you start abandoning your own needs. You silence the part of you that longs for clarity, consistency, and partnership, because you fear that asking for those things will push him away. It becomes a silent negotiation where you shrink your desires just to keep him from running. But here's the truth that's hard to accept. Someone who is ready for love will not treat commitment like a trap. They won't talk about intimacy as if it's a loss of freedom. They'll see it as a deepening of their freedom. Because real commitment doesn't erase individuality, it magnifies it. It creates the safety that allows two people to fully express themselves without fear of abandonment. An avoidant man doesn't understand this yet, because his nervous system still equates closeness with danger. So no matter how extraordinary you are, he will sabotage anything that threatens to pull him into true emotional depth. That's not a judgment of his character. It's simply an acknowledgement of where he is in his emotional development. And that's why this red flag matters, because love cannot thrive where commitment is treated like confinement. You deserve someone who doesn't need to be convinced to stand beside you. Someone who chooses you without hesitation, not because they've been persuaded, but because they're ready to love with their whole heart. If you have to keep proving your worth just to earn a place in someone's future, understand this. Your worth was never in question. Their readiness was. Perhaps the most insidious red flag of all is the way an avoided man will consistently minimize or dismiss emotional conversations. At first, it can seem harmless. He brushes off a vulnerable moment with humor, deflects with logic, or tells you you're overthinking when you try to share how you feel. But over time, this pattern sends a subtle, corrosive message that your emotions are too much, that they are inconvenient or even unwelcome. And here's the danger. You start to believe him, you start editing yourself. You stop bringing your full emotional self to the table, not because you've lost your feelings, but because you've learned they won't be met. That is the silent erosion of intimacy, not through loud rejection, but through quiet invalidation that makes you question the legitimacy of your inner world. This isn't just emotional immaturity. It's often rooted in how avoidantly attached people were conditioned to survive. Many grew up in environments where emotional expression was ignored, punished, or ridiculed. They learned that vulnerability was dangerous, that if they revealed their inner life, it would be used against them or simply go unheard. So now, as adults, they shield themselves by shutting down whenever feelings enter the room. They intellectualize pain instead of feeling it. They prioritize logic over empathy, not because they lack hearts, but because their nervous systems equate emotional closeness with threat. And if you don't recognize this pattern for what it is, you can spend years trying to earn the right to be fully human in front of someone who is terrified of seeing the full spectrum of your humanity. What makes this especially tricky is how subtle the invalidation can be. He might not overtly criticize your emotions. Instead, he might quietly withdraw when you're upset, go silent during difficult discussions, or offer generic platitudes instead of true engagement. And because he rarely explodes or lashes out, it's easy to excuse the behavior as simply being calm or rational. But emotional unavailability doesn't always look like anger. Sometimes it looks like neutrality that becomes emotional absence. And when that absence repeats over time, it conditions you to stop seeking comfort from him at all. You begin to carry everything alone while pretending you're fine just to preserve the connection. But a relationship where you can't bring your pain is not a safe relationship. It's a performance. This is why emotional dismissiveness is so dangerous. It doesn't just block connection in the present, it rewrites your relationship with yourself. You start suppressing your emotional instincts, doubting your own perception, and questioning whether your needs are even valid. It creates a quiet kind of loneliness that is far more damaging than being alone, because you're not just alone. You're alone while standing next to someone who is supposed to see you. That dissonance chips away at your sense of worth until you forget that your feelings were never the problem. Their inability to sit with them was. And this is the truth you have to hold on to. Love is not the absence of conflict or pain. It is the presence of safety within it. It's the willingness to stay emotionally present when things get messy, to meet each other's humanity without flinching. If you are with someone who repeatedly retreats from that, understand that you are not too emotional. You are simply asking for real intimacy, and real intimacy requires emotional presence. Anything less is just proximity, and proximity without presence is not love.